the goal is to win trust and to win confidence, not to get some sort of compliance or some sort of like, because now you're like a troublemaker. And you do not want to be a troublemaker, your boss. You want to be the exact opposite. You want to be a trouble remover. How can whatever troubles my boss, I don't only not want to be the source of that. I want to remove that as much as possible. Dale.
David.
Welcome back.
We are back at the bar.
We're back at the bar?
No guest today.
No. Enjoyed having Matt over from law enforcement.
Yeah, that was
teaching
good.
us about the ropes. I was super curious to like know what is it, like airbag dust smells like. That's because that's something that's like you never want to smell it.
You don't want to have a reason to.
You never want to have a reason to.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a unique smell.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I was super grateful to have him on. It was nice. It was really powerful to hear some of his perspectives, and yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So today's discussion, you kind of brought it up.
I did. Yeah.
And
well, so I'm
curious if there's anything that sparked that.
Well, so I'm getting I have gotten for a long time. So one of those things that comes up oftentimes in therapy, and I'm sure you've gotten this too, or like people come to therapy for, right? Like, is they're trying to work out conflicts that they have in their life. And in many cases, sometimes what that has to revolve around is work, right? And sometimes what happens is, okay, like they have multiple conflicts in the same arena. And so finally, like time after time, now they're the only thing left to examine is their self, right? Now, in certain cases, before it gets to, let's say they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conflicts, and before it gets to that place, sometimes people are a little bit more proactive to be able to say, okay, I'm noticing these conflicts. I'm not really sure what to do. I've been in this job for a while, and I'm having trouble getting along, say, specifically with my boss, right? Because obviously there's interdisciplinary conflict, but then there's administrative conflict.
Yeah.
Right. With your higher up. And I would say that's a little bit more precarious.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to have conflict between people in the workplace. It's another thing to have conflict with your boss.
Yeah. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, your boss is who pays you, right? And then,
Yeah.
Your boss has the power. It's a power dynamic.
Yeah.
That gets in the way.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we navigate that?
Have you ever had a boss that you didn't get along with? Don't speak.
Well, if you've listened to my people pleasing episode,
okay, yeah,
it's very unlikely I haven't got along with them, but it doesn't mean they have not been a difficult boss.
Sure,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I've had a number of bosses, and let's say most of them have been great. I can think back to some very positive experiences. And it's interesting when you think about like a good boss.
Yeah.
A good boss is like, it means the world. I think people underestimate. There's this saying that people don't quit companies, they quit bosses.
That's a great statement. I actually haven't heard that before.
Yeah. So they don't quit companies, they quit managers, right? So
yeah, you
can be in an amazing company.
Yeah.
If you have a bad boss, it doesn't matter how good that company is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who can shape a lot of the quality of your work experience
and the landscape.
Versus like you can work in a so I've worked in companies that I'm like, dude, I don't agree with a lot of what's happening organizationally. But I had a boss who like would back me up. Who would like she would like lay her life down for me. Like I made some serious mistakes, right? And she wouldn't just like, she would have easily been able to just, write an email to the other leadership and be like, yeah, sorry, this was David's mistake.
Sure.
but she kind of owned it. She covered us,
Sure.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, took the hit.
Like, yeah, like, sorry we did that, right?
Mhm.
Even though it was clearly me.
Mm.
But obviously she'd also be like, listen,
Mm.
I'll cover you, but you got to show up. You got to do your part.
Yeah.
If you do your part, I'll cover you.
Yeah.
Like, I got your back.
Yeah.
But you got to show up as well. And it was such a camaraderie, such a bond.
Yeah.
It almost felt like, you know, I don't really like this phrase of like work is family. I'm like, no, work is work.
Yeah.
But
sure.
in many ways it felt like that.
Yeah.
And so when you have a boss like that, and then you have other bosses,
Mhm.
and especially in like corporate America, it's just I've had some I have some bad bosses, right?
Yeah.
The bad bosses, in my experience, are not the bosses who just like simply don't care. It's the bosses who pretend to care.
Ah. Interesting.
Who say one thing but do another.
Yeah.
And you realize they're acting in self-interest. Those are the bosses I've found most difficult to interact with.
Yeah.
And who clearly just like they use that power.
Yeah.
For self-interest.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, okay, how do I handle this?
Yeah.
Because if I think back to my good bosses,
yeah,
I mean, I didn't really have to think much about, okay, what do I say? How do I interact? I'm just like, no, dude, just do your job. Be kind, just very general, like relationship principles, and she'll back you up. She'll take care of you. But the other bosses, it's been like, man, I got to be a bit more tactful, a bit more intentional about how I interact. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Don't want to step on the dragon's tail, if that
the dragon's,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. So tell me about your experience with bosses.
Ah, man. Well, so obviously now I work for myself.
Okay, so what does that mean? What is that?
We could take that to mean a lot of different things, in the sense that like I have authority issues.
Say more.
No, I would say no. I think that what you alluded to and what you said was actually very, very poignant and helpful, and true in my own experience as well. When I think back to say some of the jobs that I've had, I definitely found that to be true, in the sense that the amount of enjoyment that I took from the work was heavily predicated based on the relationship that I had with the authority figure. Right. And how secure that relationship felt. Because, and I've said this before, like to some degree, as much as like, and I don't want to like over therapize the workplace, but to some degree, I feel like we bring in our own family stuff to the workplace, and you kind of see it all the time. Yeah. Because if you think about it, you're at work the majority of your life.
You are. Like if you count
the hours, right? Especially the average male, like you're going to be at work the majority of your life. The first part of your life you spend with your family. And then like after doing that, you go to school and you spend the majority of time, but then it's like work.
9 to 5.
Right? 9 to 5. So essentially everything that's grown within this family circle and then continues to permeate within the social academic circle then translates to work.
Wow. Yeah.
So who were you in your family? How did that exist? Sooner or later, I would say it's likely to come out in your workplace.
Yeah.
Unless you're very intentional with how that looks.
Yeah.
And so for me, right, I've found that to be true. And so it's given me pause to try to understand better, like, okay, how I can exist in workplaces. But when I was working for other individuals, I would say I definitely agree to what you're saying. It was interesting for me because I think of like a few of the best, like the most fondest jobs I had. One of them was working, I said this before, working at a Domino's, right? I was flipping pizzas. I loved my immediate supervisors, right? Like the shift managers, if you will. Like I had great relationships with them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and
why did you love them?
Well, I felt like there was a degree of equal trust. There was a degree of accountability, and there was also a degree of leadership slash being a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. I stole that from my wife. Props to her.
I love
she
it.
was the one that introduced me to that
Guide
saying.
on the side,
Yeah,
rather than the sage on the stage.
Yeah. So, and I think that was very helpful in those places, because there was definitely a, okay, like if you think about the principles of like, say, disseminating information, right? I'm going to show you what to do, then I'm going to ask that you do it with me, and then I'm going to watch as you do it. Right? And so it's like there's a mirroring effect that takes place, I think, when good leadership starts to lead well, and then that in turn allows the employees, or rather followers, to understand what to do. Now, if I think of like places that weren't so good, typically it appeared like there was a high level of insecurity with the individual that was leading.
Boom. That's it.
And I think about, when I think about that, I think about this book, like The 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene. And he actually co-authored this. Well, and let me see. I might be, this might be a misquote here, because I was listening to an interview with him, and he stated that a lot of what he did when he was writing this book was he had talked with, and I don't actually know. Maybe you do, I don't know. He'd co-written it, and I'm looking at the book now.
Yeah.
And I actually can't. Maybe you can find that.
Yeah. He'd co-written it with somebody.
Well, I thought he had co-authored it, but it doesn't appear like here. Like, I thought he'd co-authored it with 50 Cent. But that may be a different part of the book or something like that.
Yeah.
And this was on an interview with him. But
interesting. Maybe he was somehow involved.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, okay, no. So 50 Cent did not co-author 48 Laws of Power. However, 50 Cent and Robert Greene did collaborate on a separate book titled The 50th Law.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what. Okay, excuse me. Law, yeah, nice. Okay. Well, so circling back to this though, and the levels of insecurity that I've seen exist within negative workplaces, he talks about on Law 18. He talks about Machiavelli, and how Machiavelli makes the argument that in a strictly military sense, a fortress is invariably a mistake. Right? He says that it becomes a symbol of power's isolation and is an easy target for its builders' enemies. Designed to defend you, fortresses actually cut you off from help and cut into your flexibility. They may appear impregnable, but once you retire to one, everyone knows where you are. And a siege does not have to succeed to turn your fortress into a prison. With their small and confined spaces, fortresses are also extremely vulnerable to the plague and contagious diseases. In a strategic sense, the isolation of a fortress provides no protection and actually creates more problems than it solves, i.e., because humans are social creatures by nature, power depends on social interaction and circulation. To make yourself powerful, you must place yourself at the center of things. As many other kings did. All activity should revolve around you. You should be aware of everything happening on the street and of anyone who might be hatching plots against you. Now, so this is like, to me, like that description though, sounds like I don't think he's wrong. However, it also sounds like it's coming from a place of insecurity as well.
Okay.
Right. In order to be, at least it would be very difficult to be involved in that scene and keep a face. Right. With also not engaging. And personally, we've shared, you and I have talked about this, like in other contexts of other jobs that I've held, where I've been in leadership positions. And the problem and mistake that I made was separating myself from the the group, if you will,
Mm.
and allowing things to run too autonomously.
Yes.
So much so that in this example, like in the book, I wasn't aware of what was going on enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think there's a fine balance there, but
Mm.
I also think that in many cases,
So do you think
Go for it.
do you think that's warranted? Like what are you saying? What are you saying?
I do think it's warranted, but I
Yeah.
think you have to be really careful about how that's done.
Okay.
Because I think that we can become too hyper vigilant about that.
Mm.
Like too high, or it would be easy to become too hyper vigilant about, okay, putting myself in the center and then being too concerned with what's happening. It's one thing to be mindful of, hey, like you're in around the thing that you created, right? And trying to facilitate that culture. It's another thing to become so disconnected from it, you're not even aware of what's happening.
Wow. Yeah, and that's a pretty dangerous place to be, because it's like,
yeah,
you need to understand. You got to understand your environment to be of value to it.
Yeah.
And to remain relevant.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I think that's true. And I think that's one thing that oftentimes entrepreneurs struggle with is like shifting from that place of, okay, I'm running this thing. Now I want to create it so that it can operate on its own. That's a very tricky place to go to, because you have to be able to find people that can facilitate the same values and essentially mirror you in the same way, so that your ability to keep pulse and culture doesn't have to be so disconnected. Right. So for instance, like the owner of Chick-fil-A doesn't work at every Chick-fil-A.
Nope.
But presumably the culture was created so heavily with the right people in place and the right values in place, so that, okay, it can operate independently and autonomously now without me. But that was done very specifically.
Yeah.
So so we just opened up a lot of worms there. I'm curious for you. Can you talk a little bit more about, because this is interesting, because I think, excuse me, I'm going to back up.
Yeah.
And maybe you can give your insight on this. To me, this book, 48 Laws of Power, talks an awful lot about, okay, how to exist with somebody who may be very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And how to get to the top.
Yeah.
It's all about the individual, perhaps, who is subservient.
Yeah.
Whereas,
right. It assumes you're in a position.
Yes.
That is not of power.
Yes.
Right? But you have to understand power.
Yes.
So you can achieve power.
Sure. What's interesting to me, though, is that it seems, and I would like your take on this. It seems to me that to some degree, it's coming from a place. It seems as though it's coming from a place of a high level of insecurity and almost what we might call like dark psychology. Like if we were to view the 48 laws, like, and I say dark psychology, but like, it's not, I shouldn't say dark, but it's like, for instance, law number 2, never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies. Right?
Yeah.
Law number 3, conceal your intentions. Law number 4, always say less than necessary. So let's just talk about those first ones. Like, what are your thoughts when you hear those first things?
Right. Use your enemies.
Yeah.
So, So, I mean, I haven't read through the book. Obviously, like, listened to Robert Greene on podcasts and heard a lot about the book, but haven't like fully read through it. But
so
I think
presumably just off this first take.
Just off the first take. I think that in the general, like, I feel like his book is helpful for understanding how people work, especially in corporate America.
Sure.
Because it's a pretty, it can be a dog-eat-dog type of system, right?
So it sounds like what you're saying is, hearing that initially, that resonates with your own experience in working in a corporate
setting. World.
Yeah.
Yes, to a certain extent, yes. Because you'd assume that, like, when you go to work, like, everybody treats each other decently, we care for each other, and they always, when you read the culture code of a company, it's always nice and dandy, and like, we value people and we value everything. But then when push comes to shove and there's budget cuts that need to be made, let me tell you, you're the last priority
Mm-hmm.
as an employee. Like
Mm.
the the most important people are the shareholders of the company.
Yeah.
If you're not a shareholder, you're an employee. You're a
Mm.
liability.
Mm.
So they'll kick you out. It's at will, right? It's at will employment. If they
Sure.
have to cut costs, you're out,
Sure.
right? So you have to always remember at the end of the day, like there's certain things that people have to prioritize.
Mm.
And like, how do I understand and navigate this environment in a way that can allow me to succeed,
Mm.
right? And so I think books like that can be helpful to just understand how these elements of power work.
Sure.
Now, whether you want to apply some of the principles, I think that's where there's some debate to be had, right? Because it sounds like his book is, well, I'd be curious to know like what value system he's using when he's highlighting these different principles. Right? Because I guess he's giving like advice, like, hey, if you want power, do XYZ, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the question is power through what means, like
Sure.
with what values?
Yeah.
Because then that's a question of like, okay, but what if using your enemies in this certain way goes against your values?
Sure. Well,
right?
like for instance, it says law number 14: pose as a friend, work as a spy.
Yeah.
And that to me like screams corporate work.
Yes.
Like it sounds like we're talking about espionage in some way. Right?
Yeah. Pose as a friend, work as a
work
spy.
as a spy.
Yeah.
So, and it's always presuming to say that there is a rival. Like so in most of these laws, it's talking about like, okay, being able to somehow
yeah,
understand your rival and understand your enemy, if you will. Like law number 15 says, crush your enemy totally.
Okay, let's talk about the pose as a friend, work as a spy.
Sure.
Because I think there's some merit to that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Your workmates are primarily your workmates. At work, they're your workmates. They're not your friends. Okay. And I found challenges, and I've seen people find a lot of challenges where they try to make friends of their bosses, of their coworkers.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but I thought they were my friends. Like, no. We are under contract here. We're here to work, right? So what does that mean? Not be friendly? Right? Does that mean not gain trust? It's like, no, it doesn't. You can be friendly. Yeah. You can gain trust, but then they realize that you're here for work. And so, I mean, I probably rephrase the pose as a friend, work as a spy, but just like understand that this is not, you can be friends outside of work, but at work you're working. And that can be, there's some wisdom that's required there to make that distinction. And what do you think?
I think that's true. Part of me thinks that the reason why this is phrased the way that it is to some degree like it is a marketing ploy. Right? It was done very well. Like it gets your attention. Yeah. Every one of these laws grabs your attention.
That's so true.
Right? And it's like, what? I have like
crush my enemies.
Pose as a friend, work as a spy. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. Right? Yeah. Now, if you were to read some of these, okay, then you actually get like more information from these things. Now, to some degree, I think some of this is helpful, but then I think where this becomes problematic is when you have like if you apply these principles as a leader, right? So if I'm a leader and I say I get others to do the work, but then I always take the credit, people hate that. Yeah. Right? Because now you're not fostering an environment to where people are praised for the work that they do. right?
Appreciate it.
And feel appreciated. Now, I don't know that that's exactly what he means in that context. I would argue that this, I think he's probably pretty smart to be able to understand some of the nuances here. But I do think that largely this book is a selling scheme that in many ways has a lot of really good information. For instance, even the first law, never outshine the master. If we were to read that one, always make those above you feel comfortably superior. In your desire to please or impress them, do not go too far in displaying your talents, or you might accomplish the opposite. Inspire fear and insecurity. Right? That would be what would happen if you accomplish too much. Make your master appear more brilliant than they are, and you will attain the heights of power.
Yeah, what do you think about that one?
I think largely that's probably true. At least in my own experiences, like I haven't always done this very well, and it does inspire fear and insecurity.
Yeah.
I think this especially is relevant in an academic setting, right? If as a student, I attempt to do this and I don't have a teacher that's very secure in what they know, like then, okay, no, it can inspire fear and insecurity.
Yeah. Which in many ways, a boss has that hat of like teaching you, guiding you, which can be hard when you feel, sometimes you get a boss that you feel more qualified.
Yeah.
Then.
Sure.
Right? Or if you get a boss who's younger than you,
sure,
hasn't had as much work experience, maybe they just went to a good school.
Yeah.
And then it's like, man.
How do I do that? Yeah.
Yeah. But then it's like, how do I deal with them?
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah.
I think that is especially true in those settings, to where it's like, okay, no, you should be very careful with displaying how much you know, because you have to recognize that people are people and they will feel insecure under the right settings and circumstances, right? That can happen. And so if we don't understand that well, we can put ourselves in a very precarious place. And so I think by and large that law is pretty good.
Yeah.
In the sense that like I think having that being the underpinning for all the rest of these actually makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's an important one.
Yeah.
Right? Because
probably, and I would say arguably the most important.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. For dealing with your boss.
Yeah. For dealing with your boss in particular. Like if we're talking about that in particular, it's like, okay, like make sure that we don't try to outshine and then foster a sense of insecurity there.
Yeah. Because it undermines the very position of boss. Like,
yes.
You're my boss, but I'm not going to treat you like you're my boss. That's just not a good start.
No.
Right?
No, it's not.
It's like, remember who the boss is. You don't have to respect them.
No. I think people conflate. Well, I think also they conflate this with liking them with how we treat them visibly. Like people have a hard time, I think, regulating their emotions to say like, okay, well, if I don't respect you, I can't treat you well. I don't think that's true. I think it's possible to treat someone well that you don't respect.
I'd feel tough.
Oh, 100%. And I think
it's possible.
I think that's where like we get into this play of people talking about like, well, I don't want to be fake. Everyone's so fake.
Right. Exactly. It's exhausting.
Yeah,
being fake is exhausting.
Well, yeah. So like, if it keeps your job, like, and granted, that's where, okay, to a certain degree, I can understand the exhausting nature of that in the sense that, no, it is tiring because you're not allowing some level of self-expression, right? I think people get used to feeling as though they always have the right and need to self-express everything. It's like so much of our culture now is predicated on me being able to have self-expression,
right?
As if it's a need that has to happen 24/7, and it's not.
It's not.
No. And I would say, especially in the workplace, like that's something that I would say that's a large shift within the last last 20 to 30 years is that we had this idea that, okay, I need to be able to self-express. Now self-express everywhere. Until I'm expressing all over you. Right?
No. Right.
And so I think that really sets people up for failure because they inherently don't understand how to regulate their own emotional impulse, i.e. expression. And so they conflate this notion that, well, if I don't respect you, if I don't like you, I can't work here or under you in any capacity. And I don't think that's true. I think we can. It's very difficult. Don't get me wrong. I've had bosses that I don't respect. But at the end of the day, if my value system is created effectively, I don't need to respect them because it has nothing to do with them. How I conduct myself and my affairs has everything to do with me. Right? And the person I desire to be. Right? How I desire to operate. Because now we're talking about personal autonomy. Right? And now we're talking about like a more existential work, right? To harken back to Frankl's work, right? He's like the last thing they can take from you, right? They can't take, right? Your freedom to choose, right? And so I think that's extremely relevant when working in a negative workplace is that, okay, like I don't have to like them. I don't have to respect them. I don't have to be great friends with them. I can still operate. I can still operate according to my values. Now, there may come a time when that shifts based on, all right, the type of life that we want. Because don't get me wrong, it is tiresome.
Oh, yeah.
All right, what are your thoughts?
Not very sustainable.
Yeah.
Not very sustainable.
Yeah.
It's very warranted in various seasons of life. Right? Where it's like for one reason or another, there are other competing priorities like feeding my family, right? Trying to get the work experience that I need to get to the next level.
Yes.
Right? Whatever the case may be, maybe the job market's not good. Like, there are competing priorities, right? And then you can, like you said, cultivate that power to choose. And with bosses, it actually can work in your favor, right? When you might not respect them, but if you just treat them like the boss, it can work in your favor, right? And that's where, again, like we get confused when we feel entitled to a certain level of treatment by a boss in a workplace, right? Again, this is different from having a conversation with your spouse at home of like, hey, versus like at work. It's like, it's more so like you got to win them over as much as possible instead of like demand to be treated a certain way. Because that's not gonna, because the goal is to win trust and to win confidence, not to get some sort of compliance or some sort of like, because now you're like a troublemaker. And you do not want to be a troublemaker to your boss. You want to be the exact opposite. You want to be a trouble remover. How can I, whatever troubles my boss, I not only not want to be the source of that, I want to remove that as much as possible. And so that requires a level of like, even if I don't respect you, I need to understand what troubles you. What do I find my boss complaining about a lot of the time? What are their pain points, right? They might say something that's their pain point, but what's their actual pain point? Is it that people, for example, don't, let's say they don't do documentation. You know, they don't do their notes, or they don't, there's some sort of documentation they don't do, and this boss just hates when people don't do that. So for you, it's like, okay, I should make sure I always do my documentation, that I'm never a source of, and then take it another step. Okay, how can I even help this person help others do their documentation? Like remove their sore spot, right? That is heading the right direction towards, I think, a better work environment with your boss.
Yes. And it sounds like obviously it's also heading towards the direction of people pleasing.
True.
Right.
Yeah,
so we
that's
have
true.
to be careful with, okay, to what level do we do that? Right. And we kind of have to gauge that.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Because you could end up working nights.
Weekends.
Trying to.
I think. Did you ever see the movie Office Space?
Office Space.
You haven't seen Office Space?
No.
Oh
Is
my
this a 90s
goodness.
movie?
Yes.
Of course. I'm like, all of these are 90s
I
movies
think
Dale
I'm pretty.
watched.
Let me see. I could be wrong. It could be
Uh,
early 2000s.
okay.
Why don't you
Well,
look?
is it like a comedy?
Yes, it's
Okay.
hilarious. Why don't you look it up?
Yeah.
You need to watch
Which
this.
actors?
I don't even remember the names.
Mhm. Office Space. That's funny. Corporate drone. Peter Gibson's Ron Livingston hates his soul-killing job at a software company. While undergoing hypnotherapy, Peter is left in a blissful state when his therapist dies in the middle of their session.
Oh no.
He refuses to work overtime, plays games at his desk, and unintentionally charms two consultants into putting him on the management fast track. When Peter's friends learn they're about to be downsized, they hatch a revenge plot against the company inspired by Superman 3. What in the world? 1999.
99. Okay.
Yeah.
Still in the 90s. It is okay, so I think this movie, it's like it epitomizes in some ways this dichotomy of what people struggle with and how they desire to act, but
Mhm.
also how they know they cannot act in say a corporate setting or the workplace, if you will.
Mhm.
Because like in this film, he does all the things that like you never should do. And initially, like he's the model citizen, but then like
Ah.
also experiencing all of the terrible things of a workplace with little boundaries. He has a terrible boss, like
Yeah.
who asks terrible things of him, right? But then simultaneously, eventually, it just throws the baby out with the bathwater, and that's how things operate and stay. And I think now, like fast forward 25 years, in some ways it seems as though many places are trying so hard to keep employees or appease employees, or people in general don't know how to get along with authority figures, right? In the setting of saying, okay, like how do I operate in this context? And I think that's a significant challenge, mostly because they also don't understand or are not able to play the tape out well enough. Say the long term here, like, okay, I get that this person is doing A, B, C, and D that I really detest, I don't like, right?
Mhm.
If I display this too much or try to hold my own position because I feel as though I am being attacked or undermined, that is going to work against me. And I would say that in many ways, what I said earlier when we talk about, okay, what was the role you had in your family?
Mhm.
If you were one in your family that felt attacked or felt as though people didn't respect you or think enough about what you did or are doing, chances are you're more prone to try to speak up for yourself, albeit somewhat inadvertently or unproductively. And then it may, in fact, work against you, right? Because then people just see you as piping up too often or trying to overcompensate. But then if we take this to the workplace, now it looks, I would say it plays a double negative, if you will. And that's where I would say we have to be mindful of that to understand how that looks.
Yeah. How would you recommend someone navigate this idea of like not people pleasing, but still trying to maybe meet the requirements of the boss, win over their boss, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I think that I do think that there's merit to what this book kind of outlines in saying, like, so that obviously many different laws in here. One of them, it's interesting. Let me find it here. Plan all the way to the end, right? It's law number 29. So it says the ending is everything. Plan all the way to it, taking into account all possible consequences, obstacles, and twists of fortune that might reverse your hard work and give the glory to others. By planning to the end, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances, and you will know when to stop.
Okay.
Gently guide fortune and help determine the future by thinking far ahead. So I think there's argument there to be able to say, okay, if I plan this out accordingly, I will also know to what level I'm giving too much of and how I can best still provide this without overspending, right? So I can play this tape out all the way. Or I know, all right, I'm going to give it all my everything. That's what it's going to be for this amount of time, right? I'm appropriately understanding the cost. So I think that's one way we navigate that, because we may say, okay, no, I am going to people please, but it's for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or rather, I know that this is the cost at which I'm able to give, and this is how it's going to look, and these are the prices that I'm willing to pay. So plan that out. And I think that when things don't go well, typically it's because we didn't plan that out. We didn't play the tape out. We didn't see that, okay, it may go this way, and then that may be what happens. Now, sometimes I would say that when we do that well enough, if things don't go the way we want them to, it's an easier exit. Because, well, no, I understand these variables took place, and now, yeah, this is my exit. This is where I leave you.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. So plan it out. Like, what do you want out of this?
Yes.
What are you in to give?
Yes.
That makes sense, because I've been just thinking back to my own experiences. Like, again, I would really gauge like the emotional response of my boss.
Yeah.
Right. And just like really trying to like make them happy.
Yes.
It got to a point, I remember a certain job where I realized that there's nothing I could do to make them completely entirely happy.
Sure.
Because in general, they're just maybe like an unhappy person.
Sure.
Or they just get stressed out about the smallest thing.
Yes.
Whether it's me, whether something else triggers it, like it's just, right? Yeah. Even if I'm meeting all the requirements of my job, maybe they just have bad days. And I think a lot of people understand what that, like there's just bosses who have temper tantrums, they bring their family stuff in, and they just have bad days. No matter how good of a job you're doing. So in that case, like people pleasing in that way, like it looks different in terms of winning over your boss. It shouldn't be predicated on their emotional response.
Yes.
Because that's so unpredictable.
Yeah, you're gauging it wrong at that point, if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, okay, what else can we gauge it on? That's more concrete. That's more structured, right? So is it like meeting certain requirements, doing certain tasks that that it's important to them from a very like concrete, like, KPI, key performance indicator perspective, right? Like, we're meeting that, and it's like, whether they're having a bad day or a good day, they know you met those KPIs.
Sure.
So when it comes down to it, and they're looking at your quarterly review, they're like, dude, I have not, like, he did it. Like, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. Like, he did it, right? He did his job.
Yeah.
That's where it's like, okay, I know what I need to do.
Yeah. I would say too, like let's scale it down some. So another job I really loved, for a while, I worked at a hardware store. It was great. It was a great job. I worked very hard to try to people please. That was at a point to which I could do that, and I could afford to do that. And I would say there was a couple of people in my life at that point that I never really understood how to please them, because I was gauging it on, to your point, their emotional state, or rather how they acted towards me. And I think that can be a precarious mistake, right? Because what instead we should evaluate it on is, okay, what do they entrust me with?
Yes.
Right? Not how they act towards me, because they actually don't act any differently towards me than they do anyone else. So in a way, they're very fair, right?
True.
They question everyone, right? Perhaps, right? I had a boss at one time that questioned almost everything that I did, whether or not I completed something, whether or not, like, if I was sure I did that. But I realized that they did this to everyone. Yeah. It wasn't just about me. They weren't singling me out. Yeah. They did that with themselves as well. But I had to get to the place to where I really observed that carefully and see that to be true. And then I was able to say, okay, this has no bearing. Like, I shouldn't gauge my level of production or my ability to achieve here predicated on how they treat me or whether they question me. That's a wrong measurement. How much do they entrust me with? They can still ask me whether or not I did it right.
But how much still entrusting?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that was a helpful way to start measuring things. And I would say where I actually did this poorly, or rather where I struggled the most with this, was actually in an academic setting.
Why is that? Why is that?
You're laughing.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I've heard stories.
Yeah. Well, it's because I in certain settings I did outshine the master. Right? Or I wouldn't try to placate, or if I saw that there was a vulnerability, I would try to, like, I wasn't treating it as though I was concerned about their well-being. I was, and now, albeit I know that I wasn't trying to be vindictive in moments. I was so focused on learning that I was disregarding other people's emotions, including the instructors, for that purpose, even if it meant questioning them and how they approached things. Because I felt that, okay, I'm paying for this thing. Yeah. Right.
I'm paying for this education.
Yes, I need to learn here. I want to understand. And so that was driven so hard that it came at the behest of me being able to adequately bear in mind that there's still an instructor here. And there's still a power dynamic here that I need to be aware of.
Right.
And I need to give credence to. And until I did that well, things were difficult for me.
You'd have opposition. You ran into
I ran into all types of issues and opposition, even to the point to where instructors would tell I had an instructor tell me once that a class was a failure because of me.
Like teaching that whole class.
Yes.
Was a failure.
It was a failure.
That whole semester. Because of you.
Because of me. And
I think were you like raising your hand in class or something?
Well, I
disagreeing with
I said something very disrespectful.
Okay.
There was an evaluation that was done, and the question was asked, did I learn anything? And I said no. It was a very pompous and arrogant thing to say.
Well, someone to say you're being honest.
Yeah, but the problem was, one, that's a terrible question. Like, don't ask that question, right? But two, the statement was also made that they want us to be honest no matter what.
That is what you just brought out is a very important.
Yes,
because people don't really know what they're asking for.
Exactly, and I do think that was a problem on the part of the instructor. Like they didn't understand, like they didn't know how to do that appropriately. But as soon as I heard that, I was like, okay, you asked for it. Right. In my mind, I'm like, all right. I knew, like, to a certain degree, oh, this is going to get ugly.
But you're like, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, right. But, and so at that point, I still wasn't being very tactful.
You're just like, okay, I'm going to give it to you.
Yes. Right.
And then it just blew up.
And it blew up in my face. Right. Like,
yeah.
Now,
and you're like, and one could argue, be like, but you asked me.
Exactly. Like, so other students in the room at the time were like, oh, they, I think, and that was the problem, right? This made the teacher look very bad in the moment.
Oh, this was a public setting.
Yes.
Oof.
In class.
Oof.
Right. And so it made the teacher look very bad at the moment, in which, okay, now that's a very bad thing for me because I am now target number one. Right. And
troublemaker.
Yes. And to a degree, what they said, that was a failure because of you. Like, there was an element of that was true. Right. I saw blood. Smelled blood, rather. Right. And so I went for it. However, like, had I played the tape out appropriately, I would understand and be able to say that, okay, they're asking for this because they're trying to save face, and that's the right thing, quote unquote, to ask for. This is an appeasing thing that's happening. It's not actually that they really want this. They don't actually want that, but it sounds better to say that.
Yes, it sounds better to say that.
Yes.
But they don't realize what they're asking.
They don't realize what they're asking. Right. And for me, my goal is to obviously to finish this class with a good grade because I'm paying for this class.
So how do you have, now knowing what you know now, how do you have handled that differently?
I would have said, I would have simply said, no, I learned, and I would have reiterated the things that they went over in class as new information and very refreshing, and pumped their tires.
Yeah.
Lots of really nice things. This was done very well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, it would be true that I did learn those things, just not there.
Just not there.
Right? So, but I didn't have to be arrogant with my response the way that I was. And I could have done much better to say, hey, no, this was very well. You tried to foster a very good environment.
Right. You speak to their efforts.
Yes.
Praise their efforts. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a lot of insight drawn there. And this is one other thing. Just because I didn't learn anything new doesn't mean that it wasn't displayed. So I could have spoken to, hey, you taught a lot about this, this, and that was very refreshing. I didn't have to say I didn't learn anything. I could illustrate the point that you taught all these things, and it was very nice. That would have gone over much better for me.
Yeah. And I think some of the things that make it interesting is that, first of all, it was in a public setting, right? So that's one thing with bosses. You have to be very careful. Yes. Bosses have a reputation to uphold.
Yes.
Because people need to respect their authority, right?
Yes.
So if you are dealing with your boss in a public setting, ideally you wanna make them, don't make them look bad.
No.
If you're not gonna make them look good, don't make them look bad.
Yeah.
Right?
And that was like it was a rookie mistake on my part.
Yeah.
Like just a rookie mistake.
Yeah. And same thing even with if you're dealing with like a skip level, right? So like your boss's boss.
Sure.
Also be careful how you present
100%
them, right? Unless like you're talking about like, of course, some huge ethical violation, whatever. That's another story.
Sure. In which case you're ready to be on the way out.
Yeah,
it's like gone, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah. So that's the first thing, right? And there's always this idea, and even like leaders are told, like, give praise publicly, give feedback privately.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like even if you're dealing with a subordinate,
yes,
it's like try as much as possible. Okay, if you're gonna give some,
feedback, this instructor did do that. They provided the feedback to me and told me this in private,
which is good.
Which was good.
Yeah.
Right. They didn't publicly demean me in any way. So they followed the rules on that. I did not.
Yeah. Right. And you could have still told them your issues of the class privately. Maybe
I could have
landed better.
Yes, and I think perhaps it would have landed better. 100%. But I took it face value for things, and I did not play things out well.
Yes.
And I to this book's point, I disregarded rule number 1.
So I'm curious. When you provided that feedback, do you feel like you already had a reputation? Like it was like coming from you,
growing.
Was it a surprise?
It was growing. It was a growing reputation. I had a reputation to like speak out.
Yeah.
But not to that level. Okay. Right? Like that was like it wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. It was it was more like the beam that shattered the camel. Right? So
the beam.
Yeah. So yeah. So that's more so what happened.
Baseball bat.
Yeah, it was a baseball bat.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah.
Dude, I wish I was there just for the drama, man. Just for the drama. Oh man. Do you have friends who still remember that?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's good. Yeah. That's good.
I haven't spoken to them in some time, but
yeah, they remember.
I'm sure that they do.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they do.
So going back to that point about like when people ask for honest feedback, because that bosses do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe during a during
Yeah.
a performance review or
Yeah.
they're like, hey, what are your honest thoughts? Like I really want to hear what you have to say.
Mm.
And that can be you gauge it like
Yeah.
And I would say again, be careful.
Yes.
Look more at their actions and their past behavior more than what they're telling you in the moment.
Sure.
Have they been able to handle honest feedback?
Yes.
In the past, right?
Yeah.
Have you maybe given some small light pushback or light feedback and they handled it well? Right? Because there's levels to feedback too.
Yeah.
There can be like small pieces of feedback versus like, yeah, I really think that the way you manage the team is terrible, right? Like that's a huge piece of feedback.
Yeah, you're like throwing it on there.
Yeah, versus like, hey, is it possible if you could, when I send you this, could you respond within 24 hours, right? That's a small thing versus like, hey, you
suck.
I really think that, I feel really troubled, right? So it's like, how can you gauge their ability to respond well? To feedback.
And if I think you're absolutely right. And if they show a trend that they don't, then this is where it's not where we up the ante to try to call attention to their behavior. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
Do not call attention to their behavior. And this may sound like counterintuitive. No, like for your boss, like, no, what you need to do is understand your game plan now as a result of knowing that, okay, they're not going to indulge with what it is I'm trying to provide here. I need to understand my game plan and how this plays out.
You understand. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's true.
I need to be able to plan ahead.
Yeah, it's true.
Well,
so true. Yeah. Careful with your words.
Yes.
Right. And I think that just a basic principle is just like listen way more than you speak.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's when you get the data.
Yep.
When you get the data,
Yeah.
You hear what they're talking about. They're, they can, sometimes bosses will diverge personal information about their family.
Yeah.
And you can always check in like, hey, how's how's your mom doing? I heard she was right. Just to show you care.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Like that, those are brownie points.
Yeah.
Those are brownie points.
Sure.
Right. If you listen, you hear things that are important. And you can use that to to help you.
Yeah. No, well, so I think this also parallels, and this is perhaps another book I'll bring up that we don't have as much time to get into, but it's almost like this book is like as in the 48 Laws of Power is almost like the if you were to say like, if you were to compare like Star Wars or something, this is like the dark side.
Oh,
and then like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is like the Force, right?
The Jedi.
Yeah, the Jedi. Way, even though it's really, honestly, they say a lot of similar things, right? Dale Carnegie's famous for saying, "Don't criticize, condemn, or complain."
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
And so it seems as though in that book, it's been a long time since I read that, but a lot of what I remember is that it illustrates finer points of how to be positive in spite of situations, and not say too much of negative things, but reinforce with positive reinforcers so that we get things working for us in our interest. Right. This is understanding more like understanding that people don't like it, like more of the pathology of things, and attempting to
like, this is what happens when you try to supersede the master.
Yes. And like it's essentially also attempting to win at whatever cost. Right.
Oh yeah.
Whereas I would say Dale Carnegie is a little bit different. It's like, no, like how to win friends and influence people. You may be doing all of these things in this book. It's just coming at it from a different angle. And so it's interesting to see the parallels though between those two things.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to one's like value system of like, what are they okay? What means? How far are you willing to go?
Yeah, by what? No, and I think you brought that up really well at the beginning, and I think that's true. It is that the underpinning for all of these things is predicated upon, okay, who do I desire to be, and what is important to me, and can that exist here? Can I emulate that here? I think it's relevant.
That's good. Yeah. All right.
Man, that went fast.
It did. Yeah.
Wow.
It was bosses. We just love talking about corporate life. Yeah. But yeah, like work again, like it's a majority of your time. So might as well. It's probably worth investing in how can I best create an environment that's conducive. And if not, how can I work towards? Maybe it's not the right company. Maybe it's not the right boss. People always leave bosses. It's okay to leave your boss if your boss is. But in the meantime, what's the plan? Right? What's the plan?
Well, I think we put a cherry on top and call it a day. So that was good.
All right.
All right.
Cheers.
Till the next one.